I didn't know it was going to be the last normal day of my life. It started like any other Thursday. I was driving home from work, tired but looking forward to a quiet evening. I remember stopping at a red light, watching the sky turn golden orange as the sun dipped behind the city skyline. I even thought to myself how peaceful it looked. Strange how peace can fool you. It gives you the illusion of control until it's ripped away without warning. The impact came out of nowhere. A truck, later I'd find out it had lost its brakes, slammed into the side of my car at full speed. There was a moment of chaos, glass exploding like rain, metal twisting like paper, and then silence. I don't remember pain. That was the first strange thing. I was aware of the accident, I knew I should be hurt, but there was nothing. No panic, no confusion, just a sense that I was slipping, like drifting off to sleep, but with complete awareness. Then everything went dark. I mean truly dark. A darkness that wasn't just the absence of light. It was the absence of everything. No sound, no air, no ground. I couldn't feel my body. I couldn't even tell if I was breathing. I was just there, alone. At first, I thought I was unconscious, that maybe I was in a coma or in some in-between state, but then something inside me whispered a terrifying possibility. I was dead. That should have caused panic, but instead I felt an eerie stillness, a weight pressing on my soul, not physical but emotional, a heavy silence that made me feel exposed, like something was watching me, not from outside, but from within. I began to feel things, not pain, but regret, not fear, but shame. It came in waves. Memories surfaced without warning, harsh words I'd said to people I loved, moments I'd chosen selfishness over kindness, times I'd looked the other way when someone needed help. It was like my life was being held up to a mirror, but not a mirror of judgment, one of truth. And then came the falling. It wasn't physical, but it felt real. A descent, slow at first, then faster, into something deeper. The darkness thickened, like liquid night pulling me down. That's when I knew this wasn't just death. This was something else, something I'd been taught to fear, though never fully believed in. I was falling into hell, but it didn't look like what I'd imagined. There were no flames, no horned demons, no tortured screams echoing through caverns. What I found was worse in a way because it was quiet, too quiet. I landed, not with a crash, but with a realization. I wasn't in a place as much as I was in a state of being, and the pain wasn't physical, it was spiritual, emotional, raw, and I wasn't alone. Figures began to emerge from the shadows. Some were crying, others just stared blankly, like they'd been there forever. There were no chains, no fire, just souls, lost in themselves. It was as if each person was reliving their deepest regret on repeat, unable to escape. And somehow I understood. That's what hell was. Not punishment from some angry god, but the total absence of love, of connection, of forgiveness, a place where you were left alone with yourself, and I was part of it now. I don't know how long I was there. It could have been seconds or centuries. Time didn't exist the same way. But what I do know is this. Those 7 minutes, however long they truly were, changed everything. I'll tell you more about what I saw, who I met, and the moment everything began to shift. But before I do, let me say this to you. If you're still here, still breathing, still carrying pain or regret, you have time. You have hope. What I learned in those 7 minutes is something I never expected, and it's something I believe you were meant to hear. The moment I realized I was no longer in my body was the moment I understood that death doesn't come with explanations. It doesn't knock, doesn't ask. It just arrives, quietly, like a shadow folding in on itself. I was no longer in the wrecked car. I wasn't floating above it either, like so many stories I'd heard. There was no tunnel of light, no warm welcome. Instead, I felt as if I had been peeled from the world, stripped of everything that once gave me form, and left to drift in a place that felt hollow, yet undeniably alive. There was movement, but no direction. I wasn't falling anymore, not in the physical sense, but I was going somewhere deeper. It was like sinking into water, except there was no water, just this dense, dark presence around me. I didn't see it, but I felt it. A presence of absence, if that makes any sense. A void that pulsed with sorrow. That's when I began to hear the whispers. They weren't coming from around me, they came from inside. At first, it was my own voice. Memories of things I'd said to people I loved. Moments I'd forgotten now played back with perfect clarity. I could hear my tone, the edge in my words, the coldness I hadn't noticed at the time. They echoed not as accusations, but as reflections. It was like being haunted by yourself. Then came the others. Faint at first, murmurs from souls nearby. Some pleaded, some wept, others repeated the same words over and over, as if stuck in an invisible loop. I didn't see faces, but I felt their presence, not evil, not demonic, just broken. Souls that had fallen so far into themselves that they no longer remembered light. I began to understand. This wasn't fire and brimstone hell. This was emotional exile. It was disconnection made real. Isolation so deep that it became a prison of spirit. And somehow I was one of them. I remember thinking, why am I here? I wasn't a bad person. I wasn't cruel. I didn't hurt anyone on purpose. And then came the response. Not a voice, not even words, but a truth so clear. It struck my soul like lightning. This place is not about punishment. It's about truth, about seeing yourself when nothing is left to hide behind. And that truth was heavy. I began to see parts of myself I had ignored. The quiet, indifference. The times I turned away instead of helping. The way I numbed myself with distractions instead of facing my wounds. It wasn't about religion. It wasn't about belief. It was about love. What I gave and, more painfully, what I withheld. This place. It magnified what we carry inside. The regrets we bury. The things we pretend don't matter. It all rose to the surface. Not to shame me, but to show me. To awaken me. Then, just as the despair began to take root, I felt something shift. A light. Faint. Distant. But there. At first I didn't believe it. I thought maybe my mind was creating it, like a desperate hallucination. But the feeling that came with it, I'll never forget. Warmth. Not just physical, but emotional. The opposite of everything this place had been. It felt like love. Pure, patient, and endless. And with that light came a sound. Not music, not words. Just presence. Like something ancient and kind was watching me. Not judging, just waiting. I wasn't alone anymore. That light, that presence, it was the beginning of my way back. But I didn't know that yet. All I knew was that in a place where nothing good seemed to exist, hope had just found me. Before I continue, if you've ever felt lost, if you've ever believed the darkness would swallow you whole, please know this. Even in the deepest void, love can find you. Even when you think you don't deserve it. Because I didn't think I did. But what came next changed everything. If you are feeling touched by this story, subscribe to the channel. Here each report is a hug in the soul of the one who suffers, and a reminder, you are not alone. When the light faded again, I thought I'd imagined it, that maybe it was a final kindness before the darkness took me for good. But I was wrong. Something had shifted. The silence around me had changed, still heavy, still hollow, but now with a subtle vibration, like the air before a storm. I sensed movement, not from me, but from the space itself. And then I arrived. There was no gate, no descent into flames, no voice announcing, "You are now in hell." It was quieter than that, more intimate. I simply found myself there. The place felt endless, not like a cavern or a pit, but more like a shadow stretching in all directions. The ground beneath me was dry, cracked, yet I hadn't walked. The sky above, if you could call it that, was colorless, not black, not gray, just void. And the air, if there was air, felt dense, like it clung to the soul instead of the skin. But the most striking thing, the emptiness wasn't physical, it was emotional. It was a place completely devoid of connection. No sense of being loved or even noticed. It was the total absence of belonging. I wasn't alone, though. That was the part that tore at me. They were there, others like me, shadows of people, faint outlines. Some were curled into themselves, weeping silently. Others wandered in circles, their faces locked in expressions of confusion or despair. No one spoke. No one looked at each other. It wasn't because they couldn't. It was because they didn't know how. Each soul was trapped in their own bubble of regret. I could feel it as if it were my own. That's what made this place so unbearable. You carried your pain like it was stitched into your spirit, and you were invisible to everyone else. I tried to speak, tried to cry out, to reach someone, anyone, but no sound came from my mouth, no movement from my lips. I was thinking, feeling, screaming inside, but the world gave no response. It was like I had no voice in that place, only presence. As I moved, if you could call it that, I came closer to one of the figures, a woman seated on the ground, her head in her hands. Her sobs didn't echo, her body didn't shake, but I felt her pain. It radiated from her like waves of heat, regret, loneliness, guilt. I didn't know her, but I understood her, deeply. And in that moment I realized something terrible. This was a place where people had forgotten they were loved, not punished, not tortured, just forgotten, by themselves. Each soul carried their own prison, not bars or chains, but memories, self-judgment, moments they couldn't forgive, not even when no one else blamed them anymore. I began to wonder, is this what hell truly is? A place not of fire, but of reflection so intense that it burns the soul. And worse, was I meant to stay here? The idea pierced me with panic. I didn't want to disappear. I didn't want to forget who I was. I didn't want to become one of them, one of the silent wanderers, lost in an echo of their own sorrow. So I began to think, not with my mind, but with my spirit. I called out, not with words, but with yearning. I reached for something greater, something higher, not even knowing if it would answer. And again, just as before, I felt it, a flicker, a breath, a stirring, a presence, not outside me, but within. It wasn't light this time. It was memory of love. My mother's voice when I was sick, my wife's laugh when I made her smile, my daughter's little hand in mine. Small, fleeting moments, but filled with warmth. And in that warmth, the place around me seemed to pause, as if the shadows themselves had taken notice, as if somehow I had shifted the air. That's when I knew. I didn't belong here, none of us did. Hell wasn't where bad people were sent. It was where broken souls forgot how to return, and I wasn't ready to forget. The darkness around me was alive, not in a way that could be seen or touched, but felt, like the weight of eyes watching from behind a curtain, or the chill that runs down your spine when someone says your name but no one's there. It pressed inward, not to crush me, but to remind me that I wasn't alone. Not really. That was when I heard them, the voices, not like the whispers I'd heard before, faint echoes from the corners of lost memories. These were clearer, closer. They came from all around me, yet they didn't fill the air. They filled me. The first was a woman. Her voice trembled as she spoke over and over. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Please forgive me." Her words weren't directed at me. She couldn't see me. She wasn't even speaking to the place. She was stuck, locked inside her own loop of pain. The apology wasn't for the world. It was for herself, and she had never believed she deserved forgiveness. Next came a man's voice, rough and hollow. "They don't know. I should have told them. I should have told them I loved them." The regret in his tone was unbearable. It was more than guilt. It was longing, a desperate wish to rewrite the ending, to go back and say the words that now echoed in a place where time no longer mattered. And then came others, a teenager, sobbing that she never got to say goodbye, an elderly voice mumbling, "I wasted it. I wasted my whole life." A quiet whisper, barely audible, saying only, "Is anyone there?" Each voice was like a thread in a web of sorrow, connecting strangers through a shared wound. No one could hear each other, but I could hear them all. And with every word I understood more about the nature of this place. This wasn't a realm of fire and punishment. It was a realm of isolation, where the pain wasn't what was done to you, but what you carried within you. Unspoken love, unforgiven choices, missed moments, lost chances. I wasn't a visitor anymore. I was part of it. Their pain vibrated through me, not because I belonged there forever, but because, in some way, I had lived like them, quietly, safely, never really seeing how precious every connection was. Then one voice changed everything. It didn't speak like the others. It didn't plead or cry or confess. It simply said, "You are not alone." I froze. My soul, if it had a heartbeat, skipped. The voice wasn't in pain. It was calm, like a warm breeze after a storm. Soft but filled with presence, authority without force. I looked around, though I knew I wouldn't see a face, but the presence was undeniable. "You are not forgotten." The voice was speaking to me, directly, not just to my ears, but to the core of who I was. And with each word, the darkness seemed to pull back, like mist retreating from the sun. I felt warmth again, not around me, but rising from within. A memory returned, My daughter's voice calling me daddy as she ran into my arms, the smell of my mother's kitchen on Christmas morning, the way my wife used to stroke my hair when I couldn't sleep. Love. The voice whispered one more time, barely audible but thunderous in meaning. Love remembers even here. And then, silence. Not the empty silence from before, but a sacred one. Like the moment right after a prayer. A hush that says something holy has passed through. I realized then, hell was not just a place of the damned, it was a place of the disconnected. Souls who had forgotten they were loved, forgotten they could be loved. But someone hadn't forgotten me. Someone had spoken. And it meant that hope was still possible. After the voice faded, the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of meaning, full of weight, full of me. That's when it began. I didn't feel transported, but suddenly everything around me shifted. I was no longer surrounded by wandering souls. The darkness remained, but it took on a strange clarity, like the air before lightning strikes. And then, without warning, I was no longer standing. I was experiencing. Everything I had ever done, thought or felt began to unfold before me, not as images on a screen, but as living memories. I didn't just see them, I relived them. But here's what made it different. I experienced every moment, not just from my perspective, but from the perspective of the other person involved. I was the child who cried when I raised my voice in frustration. I was the friend who felt abandoned when I stopped returning calls. I was the co-worker who longed for encouragement when I chose indifference instead. It wasn't judgment, not like a courtroom or a condemning voice. There was no booming tone saying, "You failed." There was only truth, raw, undeniable, inescapable truth. And I was made to feel the weight of how I made others feel. I thought I had lived a decent life. I never stole. I never physically harmed anyone. But here, that didn't matter. It wasn't about rules broken. It was about hearts touched. Or worse, hearts ignored. One moment struck me hardest. A memory I had long buried. Years ago, I had crossed paths with a homeless man outside a store. He asked for food. I didn't curse at him. I didn't shame him. I simply said, "Sorry," and walked past. But in that moment, I became him. I felt his hunger. I felt the sting of rejection, not just from me, but from everyone before me. I felt the loneliness he carried like a second skin, and my face, my voice, my brief indifference became another wound on his already fragile spirit. It shattered me, because I realized then hell wasn't fire, it wasn't wrath. It was the pain of seeing who you really were, when all masks were stripped away. And still, there was no condemnation. The presence from before, the one who had spoken, remained silent now, but I could feel it nearby, watching. Not with anger, but with compassion so deep it made me ache. I felt like a child being shown the consequences of his choices, not to shame, but to teach. It was in that moment that I broke. Tears, not physical, but from the soul, poured out of me. Not because I was being punished, but because I had punished myself for so long without knowing. With pride, with neglect, with fear disguised as strength. And in the middle of that collapse, something happened. I spoke. For the first time in that realm, I spoke. Not with words, but from within. "I'm sorry." It was the most sincere thing I'd ever felt. Not performative, not out of fear, just the truth. "I didn't know," I said to the universe, "but now I do." And then, like a slow sunrise through thick fog, something opened in me, not outside, inside. A door, a window, a memory. Love, real love. Not the love I thought I had earned. Not the love I thought I could lose, but the love that had always been there, waiting for me to look inward and see myself clearly, and to forgive the person I had been. I expected to be judged. What I found was that I had already judged myself for years, and all that was left was to let go. When the tide of self-judgment receded, everything became very quiet. But this time it wasn't the oppressive silence from before. It was as if the darkness itself was waiting for me to hear something that couldn't be spoken, only understood. That's when the truth began to surface, not like a sudden revelation, but like a gentle remembering of something my soul had always known. The place I was in wasn't punishment. It was a mirror. I understood then that hell wasn't a final destination. It wasn't a courtroom of fire or a divine prison. It was a space of awareness, a dimension where souls confronted the parts of themselves that had yet to be healed. I hadn't been sent there because I was evil. I had been drawn there by the pain, denial, pride, and fear I still carried. It was as if the universe was gently saying, "You cannot return to the light until you face the shadow within you." And there, in that intense stillness, I came to a realization I will never forget. Hell is not where God abandons you. It's where you hide from Him, inside yourself. Every soul I had seen, every whisper I had heard in the dark, they weren't being punished. They were punishing themselves, reliving the moment they believed they were unworthy of love, believing it was too late, thinking they were unforgivable. And then I saw, again, not with eyes, but with knowing, there were presences surrounding us, gentle, peaceful, almost invisible, guides, beings of light who stood at the edges of that place, silent, patient, waiting for each soul to choose to see them, never forcing, never invading, just waiting. They had been there all along, even for me. And the most painful realization of all was that I had never been alone, not there, not on earth. In every moment of despair, in every hidden tear, in every thought of giving up, there had always been a presence near me, but I didn't know how to listen. I didn't believe I was worthy of being heard. And now, in the darkest place, I could see the light, not a physical light, but truth. The truth that nothing separates us from God, except what we choose not to forgive in ourselves. That's when I felt something new, a pull, a soft invitation like a warm breeze brushing against me, as if someone was saying, "You can leave now. You've seen what you needed to see." But I hesitated, because now I knew. Now I understood what many others around me could not yet see. I saw the mirror and found mercy, not condemnation, and part of me wanted to help, to shout, to tell the voices around me, "You are loved, you are not alone. Look, they are here, waiting for you." But in that place, words didn't work, only the heart. And so, before I left, I made a promise, in silence, to myself and to the one who watched me with endless compassion. If I go back, if I'm given another chance, I will tell them. I will tell the world that hell is not the end, that love reaches even there, that hope exists even in the deepest darkness. And with that, everything began to change again. Just when I thought I had reached the deepest layer of that strange dimension, just when I believed the truth I had uncovered was the final revelation, everything around me began to change once more. It didn't happen suddenly like a door flinging open, but gradually as if light was gently pressing into the seams of the darkness. The air, if I could call it that, grew lighter. The weight on my soul lifted piece by piece. Something was coming. I felt it before I saw it, and then it appeared. A presence. No footsteps, no fanfare, just being. At first I couldn't see a figure. It wasn't made of form, but of light, warm, golden, enveloping. It wasn't blinding, but deep. A light that didn't just shine around you, it reached into you. I didn't look at it with eyes, I felt it with everything I was. There are no human words to fully describe that moment. Imagine the warmth of every loving embrace you've ever received. Imagine the safety of being seen and still loved. Imagine the peace of knowing beyond any doubt that you are home. That's what this being of light brought with it. And yet, I didn't feel worthy. Not after everything I had seen in myself. Not after the regrets, the missed chances, the selfish choices. I felt exposed in its presence, like every hidden thought and unspoken pain lay bare before it. I wanted to hide, but I couldn't, and I didn't need to. Because from that light came something I had never felt so purely before, unconditional love. There was no anger, no disappointment, only understanding, deep, eternal understanding. As if this being knew not only everything I had done, but why I had done it. Every fear, every scar, every moment of silence when I should have spoken, every lonely cry I never let out. It knew, and it loved me still. Then, without speaking, it began to show me something. Visions. But not like the life review I had experienced earlier. These were different. These were possibilities. I saw what my life could be if I returned. I saw the people I could comfort, the hands I could hold, the stories I could share. I saw myself hugging my daughter again, holding my wife's face, looking into her eyes with all the things I had never said out loud. I saw how my pain could become someone else's healing. And then, The being of light communicated something, not with words but directly into my soul. This was never meant to end here. This was meant to awaken you. Tears, soul-deep tears, poured through me, not of sorrow, but of relief, because I understood. I wasn't being cast out. I was being invited to return, but I had a choice, and the choice was mine alone. It didn't demand, it didn't persuade, it simply offered. Return and carry the light you've seen, or stay. Both were honored, but one carried purpose, mission, healing. And though part of me wanted to stay in that peace forever, I knew what I had to do. I wasn't done. Not yet. Choosing to return was the hardest decision I've ever made, not because I feared what waited for me back in the world, but because leaving that presence, the being of light, that all-consuming love, felt like leaving the arms of eternity. I had never known such peace, such completeness. Every fiber of my soul wanted to remain there, suspended in that sacred stillness. But I remembered the promise, if I go back, I will tell them. And I remembered the visions, my daughter's face, my wife's embrace, the souls I hadn't yet touched, the pain I could now help heal because I had seen what so many still wondered about. I said yes, not with words, with will, with surrender. And the moment I made that choice, the light didn't fade, it folded into me. That's the only way I can describe it. It was as if the presence of that being didn't stay behind, but became part of me, like a flame placed gently inside my chest, not to burn, but to warm, to guide. Then, the shift began. The realm around me dissolved, like mist pulled back by morning light. I felt weight return, not heavy like sorrow, but the weight of embodiment, gravity, time, breath. My soul was descending, and then came the pain, the physical pain, the searing, tearing agony of broken ribs, collapsed lungs, a fractured skull, my body reminding me that it had been through something it was never meant to survive. I slammed back into flesh like a wave hitting rock. I gasped. My lungs screamed for air. Machines beeped, voices shouted. I was in a hospital, bright lights, cold air, hands on my chest, and I was back. For 7 minutes, I had been gone, clinically dead. But what I had seen, what I had lived, had changed something deeper than my heart rate or brain function. I remember opening my eyes and seeing a nurse leaning over me, stunned. Her hand covered her mouth. One of the doctors whispered, "He's back." But I wasn't just back. I was reborn. Not in the religious sense, in the real sense. The old me, confused, disconnected, skeptical, had died. And what returned was someone who had seen the soul, who had tasted eternity, who now understood that death was not the end, and love was not just an idea. Love was the foundation of everything. The days that followed were filled with pain, physical recovery, neurological monitoring, emotional confusion, but none of it compared to what I had already faced. I was not afraid. In fact, I was grateful. Grateful for the accident, grateful for the darkness, grateful even for the silence, because without it I never would have heard the truth. The doctors couldn't explain my survival. "You were flatlined," one said. 7 minutes is impossible. But I just nodded, quietly. I didn't argue. I didn't try to prove anything, because I knew. And now, I had a mission. They say near-death experiences change people, but I don't think change is the right word. I was reconstructed. The man who came back wasn't just different. He was awake. Before the accident, I had lived a life of quiet disconnection. I wasn't a bad person. I paid my bills, worked hard, loved my family. But deep down I was asleep, going through the motions, numb to my own soul. I thought love meant providing. I thought being strong meant hiding pain. I thought faith was a story for people who needed comfort, not for someone like me. But after those 7 minutes, everything I believed cracked wide open. The first thing I noticed was how alive everything felt. Colors were deeper. The wind on my skin made me want to cry. Music moved me in ways I couldn't explain. And people, I couldn't stop looking at people. Their eyes, their sadness, their longing to be seen. I saw the soul in everyone. Strangers in the grocery store, the janitor at the hospital, my daughter, who once seemed just like a little girl. Now I saw her for what she truly was, an ancient soul wrapped in innocence. I couldn't explain this to anyone at first. How do you tell someone that you've seen beyond the veil of death and discovered that everything matters. Every word, every thought, every act of love withheld or given. But slowly I began to speak. To my wife first. She cried, not from fear, but because something in her recognized the truth. Then to my daughter in words she could understand. Daddy went to a place where love lives forever, I said, and she smiled like she already knew. Then I began to write. I filled notebooks with thoughts, visions, reflections. I couldn't stop, not because I wanted to tell my story, but because something inside me needed people to know, you are not alone, you are not unloved, you are not forgotten. Even now, I still feel the presence. Sometimes at night when I sit quietly by myself, sometimes when I see someone hurting and feel a sudden wave of compassion so strong it brings tears, and sometimes when I hear that gentle whisper inside that says, tell them. And I do. I began to speak publicly, small groups at first, then larger ones, not as a preacher, not as a prophet, just as a man who died and came back knowing that love never dies. People began to share their pain with me. Parents who'd lost children, widows holding onto worn-out wedding rings, men carrying guilt like armor, women who hadn't smiled since burying their mothers. They came to listen, not to me, but to the hope I carried. And I told them what I tell you now. There is no darkness love cannot reach. There is no wound it cannot mend. There is no soul it cannot reclaim. But it begins with one choice, to believe that you are worthy of it. I started living differently. I said, I love you more. I forgave faster. I listened deeper. I stopped rushing through moments. I touched people when I spoke, because touch matters. Presence matters. We think we need answers, but what we really need is connection. The kind I felt in that other realm, the kind that lives inside us, always. People often ask, are you afraid to die now? And I smile gently. No, I say, not anymore, because I know what's waiting. And it's not judgment, it's not flames, it's not some distant God counting our failures. It's home, and the door is always open. This final part isn't about me. It's for you, the one reading, listening, wondering, the one who's lost someone and still wakes up with that ache in your chest, the one who talks to a photo, clutches an old shirt or sleeps on one side of the bed so the other doesn't feel so empty. This is for the mothers who buried their babies, for the husbands who sleep alone now, for the children who never got to say goodbye, and for every soul who's ever whispered into the dark, where are you? I want you to know what I now carry in my heart, deeper than belief, deeper than knowledge. It's something I lived, something I felt in a way no words can ever fully hold. Your loved ones are not gone. They are not lost, they are not suffering, they are not alone, they are more alive now than we are. Free from pain, from fear, from time itself, and above all, they are surrounded, saturated in love. A love so whole, so pure, so complete, that even the deepest human sorrow cannot reach them. But you can, not with your eyes, not with your hands, but with your soul. When you close your eyes and remember the way they laughed, when you hear their favorite song and something inside you stirs, when you dream of them and it feels real, it's because it is. They are near, not trapped, not haunting, but present, quiet, gentle, waiting for the moment you no longer need proof, just trust. In that other realm, there is no such thing as too late. There are no clocks, no calendars. There is only presence, and in that presence, the ones you've lost are whole. They have not forgotten you, they have not moved on, they are simply ahead, waiting. And when your time comes, not before, not after, they will be there. I saw them, I felt the reunion, even in glimpses, and I promise you, it's not an end, it's a return. To arms that never stopped holding you, to a love that never stopped flowing, to a place where no goodbye is ever final. Until that day, carry them in the way you live, in kindness, in laughter, in the courage to love again, even through the ache. That's what they want for you. Not to forget them, but to remember them through love, not sorrow. And if you're afraid of death, of loss, of the unknown, remember this. I went there, and what I found wasn't terror. It wasn't punishment. It wasn't a God with a list of my failures. It was peace. It was home. And it was a love that whispered, even in the darkest night, you are not alone. The love never left. It never will. If this story brought you comfort or reminded you of someone you miss, I invite you to leave a comment. Your words may become the light someone else needs. And remember, love is stronger than death. It always has been. Thank you for letting me share this with you. You are loved, you are not forgotten, and one day when the time is right, and you'll be welcomed home.